Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. So, good morning, everyone. Welcome to this Workforce Wednesday webinar. My name is Kirsten Bayer. Today's webinar is Synergy. Do you have it? And we're going to be discussing small group dynamics and working within groups within your workplaces. Again, my name is Kirsten Bayer. I'm the Assistant Director of Communications here at the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support at Illinois State University. I also teach communication courses at Illinois Central College. I've previously taught at Richland Community College in Decatur, Illinois, and I've also taught communication courses at Illinois State University. I have a bachelor's in public relations and a master's in communications. And working with groups and communicating more effectively is definitely one of my passions to research. So I'm excited to be able to present this information to you today. So I'm today's presenter and moderator. A couple of housekeeping things before we get started. So we are on the Zoom webinar platform, similar to Zoom meeting. And if you've been on a Workforce Wednesday webinar before, you are probably familiar with it. However, you do not have the ability to unmute yourself. So if you would like to unmute yourself to ask a question at the end of the presentation, I welcome that open dialogue. You can simply raise your Zoom hand and I will unmute you and give you your microphone capability back. So it's just a little bit more of a controlled environment. Other than that, you can type in the chat or the Q&A. Let me go ahead and make sure the chat's open for all of you. So now it is, and you can participate in it. It likes to change the settings on me, so I apologize for that. But you can type in the Q&A or the chat if you have any comments or anything. And there's going to be opportunities for participation today with polling and chat discussion. And so you can also raise your hand if you would like to have that open dialogue during those opportunities as well. We will have today's webinar recorded, and the recording will be posted on Illinois WorkNet as well as our website, which is the illinoisworkforceacademy.com. You will receive a follow-up email tomorrow with that URL where you can access today's slides and the recording, as well as a follow-up survey. We have edited the follow-up survey, so it's a little bit shorter, which is nice for all of you. And the WIOA Professional Development Committee, which I sit on as representation of a neutral party for all four core partners, along with my director, Amy Julian. We do compile those survey results and then distribute them to the committee so we can make sure that the committee is hitting professional development for the whole state and all four core partners. So we welcome your feedback on that survey as well. We're going to start off with our beginning polls that we do every Workforce Wednesday webinar, and this is for just analytical purposes. We have a small audience with us today, which I actually prefer. I think it kind of makes for better participation. So like I said, there's going to be participation opportunities today. So I really encourage you all to participate. And this is just the first one. So if you could please answer where your local area is at today, and then we'll have that poll done for analytics. We'll give everyone a couple more seconds. Okay. We'll go ahead and end that. Looks like we're hitting a good span across the state. So that's exciting. I always like to see that. And then our next poll is our partner poll. So just which title do you best represent? This webinar topic is obviously not title specific. Any of the titles can make this content applicable to your workplaces, whether it's internal, small groups, or external. So I'm hoping to see representation from all four titles today. Give everyone a couple more seconds to answer this poll. All right. Looks like we have a lot of Title I and II partners on today, as well as other WIOA partners and stakeholders. I'll go ahead and share those results so you can all see what I'm debriefing on. And then I'll stop sharing. All right. So thank you for participating. We'll go start getting into the nitty-gritty of the webinar today. So today's agenda is we're going to be talking about the benefits of group work, what group synergy is, what group think is, some action tips, and then some different roles that we take within our groups. And then kind of a connection piece as well of how you're going to take this information and implement it into your workplaces and working within your internal teams. So we're going to start off with another poll. And I have a feeling that I might know the answer to this one, but we're going to go ahead and ask it anyways. Have you ever had a challenging experience working within a group? So we'll give everyone a couple seconds to answer that. Just a simple yes or no poll. Waiting on one more person to answer. Okay, pretty much, yeah. I knew that was going to be the answer was going to be yes, right? Everyone has had a challenging experience working within a group, so we can all relate, right? We can all kind of get on the same page and know that working within groups is something that we need to take some time to focus on. So I'm really excited that all of you have taken the time to join this webinar today. I think being intentional about learning more about communication skills and actually being able to think through them and then implement them, whether it's working with individuals or within groups, can really impact positively our workplaces. Even in your personal lives too, when you're working within groups, maybe volunteering for an organization or volunteering for something for your children where you're having to work with other parents or something like that. I think we can all benefit from learning how to work within groups better. So next, I want you to participate not with a poll, but you can just comment in the chat. Or if you'd rather just use a piece of paper, you can feel free to do that too. But definitely comment in the chat so we can share with everyone. But what was the challenge in one of your group work experiences? So we all said yes, that we've had a challenging group work experience. What were some of the challenges maybe that you've experienced in the past when working with groups? And then could you tell us what made that group work experience challenging or unpleasant? And if you would prefer to just answer verbally, you can go ahead and raise your hand and I'm happy to unmute you. So I'll give everyone a second to kind of think about that. Okay, so Cassandra said having differences of opinion. Yep. Christine said when participants are not on the same page or agenda as you are. Sandra says participation direction, pulling your weight. Yeah, pulling your weight is definitely a big one, I think. I teach some of this content to my college students as well. And that's always the biggest one that they have is pulling, like everyone evenly pulling your weight. I don't know what it is, but I think working in groups in college or in any kind of other formalized education or training that you've had in the past, we all kind of come into contact with people who don't pull their weight. And then that infiltrates into our workplaces. And it's usually those same people, right? Okay. Trevor says age differences and digital communication. Yeah, that can definitely be a challenge, especially when we're working within the state and we have coworkers from all different ages and digital literacy backgrounds. Mariah, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, or Maria, maybe. I apologize if I pronounce your name wrong. Students come from the countries who are at war right now. Oh, yeah. So you're Title II, I'm assuming. So yeah, they probably, I don't know if you're referring to you working with the students or the two students from the different countries who are at war working together, but I'm sure that definitely creates some conflict. I have a couple of friends personally, actually, who are middle school and high school teachers in Chicago, and they are dealing with that a lot right now with their students. Lewis, there was a lot of territorial behavior or not wanting to own certain decisions. Yeah, taking responsibility. I think individuals taking responsibility for their portion of the group work, or potentially wanting to take too much responsibility. We're actually going to talk about that in one of our roles today. So definitely we see that a lot. Lack of collaboration, stepping in when help is needed with the group, Claudia says. Juan says big personality people trying to interrupt and run the meeting. Yep, big personality. Definitely kind of goes along with that territorial behavioral role that we're going to talk about today. Poor leadership or lack of direction. Yeah, we need good leaders. Absolutely for group work. Okay, thank you all for participating. I appreciate it. Okay, so we're just going to start off high level with just the benefits of group work overall. So, group work fosters creativity and learning. Creativity thrives when people work together on a team. It blends complementary strengths. It helps us build trust with others, teaches conflict resolution skills, which sounds like from the last discussion that we just had, there was a lot of conflict, but we can, when working with others and continuing to force ourselves to work within groups, it can help teach us conflict resolution skills, promotes a wider sense of ownership, and encourages healthy risk taking because we have others to take those risks with us. I really like this quote on the left hand side of the slide that says group work is associated with deeper learning, strong information retention, and the acquisition of valuable communication and teamwork skills. So I think sometimes when we're thinking about working within groups, we kind of overlook the importance of it and how it is truly a real job skill. And I always try to emphasize that with my students. And I think we need to emphasize that in this PD session today as well, because sometimes I think we get so used to working with the same people or busy working with others. And I apologize if you hear my dogs barking. um, we get busy working with others and we forget the importance of actually learning how to do that effectively and that it is a true job skill. Um, and so I just appreciate all of you being here today. And I think, we kind of forget sometimes when we have a challenging group work experience. I know I've definitely come across this, all of the benefits of working within a group because we so focus on the challenging experience that we had. Um, Hold on one second. Actually, Cassandra is raising her hand, so I'm going, or their hand, excuse me. So I'm going to let you talk if you wanted to share something, Cassandra. Go ahead, Cassandra. You had your hand raised. Did you want to share a comment? You can unmute yourself. Oh, that was an accident. Okay. No worries. Okay. Um, where was I? Yes. So sometimes I think we just forget about the benefits of working within groups and how it can really result in like a better project or a better outcome for our work. And our work is so important that we're doing in all of the titles with WIOA funding. And I think whenever we have a bad work experience, whether it's with internal conflict or external, it can kind of put a bad taste in our mouth. And so we no longer want to work with groups collaboratively. We kind of shy away from it, maybe, which honestly puts more responsibility on us as individuals. And we take on too much. And so working with groups, I think, and learning how to do that better can just really benefit your overall work-life balance or work-life integration, whichever mindset you live by. I'm more of a work-life integration kind of gal. But I think working within groups and just learning how to do so better can really benefit us. So, when we're talking about working within groups, we want to strive to work to achieve group synergy. And group synergy is basically this idea that the output is greater than the sum of its parts. So, basically, this idea that when we're working with others, whatever that outcome is that we produce, whether it's a project, or like an event or something like that, it's always going to be better because we've had more people working together on it than just if one individual planned it. Even if that individual was, the top expert within the group, and if they planned it themselves, the outcome is still greater when we have more people involved. And so it's kind of the idea of like more heads are better than one. And so really we want to achieve group synergy. We want that output to be greater than the sum of its parts. But unfortunately, when we have challenging group experiences and we have the situations that you guys were all typing in the chat, territorial behavior, lack of collaboration, age differences, issues with participation, direction, pulling your weight, when we have differences of opinion, all of those things really inhibit our group from being able to achieve group synergy. So we know that this is our goal and we know that we want to achieve it. However, we're constantly working with others and stuck not being able to achieve this group synergy because of all of those barriers and challenges. So if we as individuals can learn how to better work within groups as our individual self, then when we go into a group setting, maybe we can be the leader or we can help others that are struggling to work within the group by kind of having this overall goal in mind and talking about, before we even talk about the goal of the project, hey, our goal as working within this group is really to achieve group synergy and have this project or this outcome or this event be the best that it can be. Some just overall arching tips for team synergy and group synergy is to obviously be clear in your goal, not only for the project, but your goal to achieve that group synergy. Over communicate with one another. I think a lot of times there's issues with working within groups just because of miscommunication. We tend to assume that things are being done when they're not. And just having that clear communication. I like to always task someone within the group to be the communicator of the group. So then that person is the one who over communicates, makes sure that everyone's on the same page and kind of ensures that, hey, Trevor, you know what you're responsible for and you know exactly what Anna communicated to you. If it was like me, Anna, and Trevor working in a group, and I would be the communicator kind of between the two, and just overemphasizing that communication. Also, giving empowerment to people. I think we're going to talk about roles today, and we're going to talk about task and relationship roles, and also disruptive roles too. But task and relationship roles and assigning those roles from the beginning when we start to work within a group. So having this overall goal, we want to achieve group synergy. Now we're going to assign our roles. This is who's going to be the clear communicator for everyone. And assigning those other task and relationship roles that we're going to talk about today can help give empowerment to everyone working within the group, whether it's a group of 3, a group of 5, a group of 10, different people, having those as set roles, not only for the project, right? Like I think when we go into working within a group, we sit down and we're like, okay, this is the outcome that we want for this project. Here's the responsibilities and who's going to do what. And that's like our approach. Instead of approaching it at this high level where our overall goal is to achieve group synergy, and our overall role is this is who's going to be taking on this task role. This is who's going to be the communicator role. This is who's going to be the initiator role. This is who's going to be some of these relationship roles. And now we're going to dive into the project. So knowing from that higher level where everyone stands within the group first before you dive into divvying up the responsibilities of the group for the project. And then also just really having that commitment to your overall goal. So I think if we can approach group work as really high level at first and say like our overall goal is to reach group synergy, and we are all committed to that. We are all on the same page of being committed that we all want this project to be the best that it can be and have it be the best outcome, because we know that when we work together effectively, it will have no chance of not being the better outcome, right? And we will be able to achieve that group synergy. So group think is basically the opposite of group synergy. So we do not want to achieve this. And when we're talking about all of the disruptive things, the lack of communication, the lack of collaboration, people not pulling their weight, bad leadership, et cetera, a lot of those disruptive roles that people are taking within working within groups is what causes groupthink. And so groupthink in a nutshell is when members of the group are more concerned with getting the task done as opposed to getting it done right or getting it done to the best that it can be, basically. And so we see a lot of people in the workplace, especially dealing with groupthink, and they're just really not concerned with the product or the outcome. Unfortunately, I like to define these people as the ones who are just there warming their seats, just there to get a paycheck, not really caring about the actual work that we're doing, which the work is so important in all four of the titles under WIOA. And so when we have people like this in the workplace, it can be frustrating and it causes all these issues of groupthink when working within groups. Because if you have one person who has this groupthink mindset, then unfortunately your group is just not able to achieve that synergy level of outcome. So it can be frustrating. Doesn't mean that you're not able to still work with these type of people and still get the product done, but that product is not going to be the best that it can be if you have a person who has this groupthink mindset. But I think being able to define what groupthink is and maybe even defining it when you're talking about group synergy, like initially when you approach working within your group, like, hey, this is our overall goal. Our overall goal is group synergy. Here's what that is. And we want to avoid groupthink. We want everyone to be on the same page. And we want everyone to have that level of commitment that we talked about. So we are going to avoid groupthink and just everyone kind of having that communication from the get-go right off the bat when you have like your first team meeting about that group project. Some other things to consider when you're working within a group, or if you're a manager on this webinar or a leader within your title where you're kind of situating people into groups for certain projects, is group size. Obviously, when you have more cooks, like too many cooks in the kitchen, it's hard to get things done. It's hard for everyone to be on the same page. So that's really important to consider. Another thing to consider is task interdependence, which is basically the degree to which the completion of a task is dependent on the completion of other tasks. So it refers to the connections between the tasks of the group of people and how their behavior needs to work together to be able to achieve those tasks. So some things to consider about task interdependence is coordination and communication. Overall, as task interdependence increases, so does the need for that coordination, that communication, and that cooperation between everyone. Some complexity is another thing to consider when talking about task interdependence. The more dimensions that a project has that define that interdependence when it comes to tasks, and the more complex it is, the more need for collaboration and adjustment is needed within people of the group. Creative synergy is also something to think about, so that when you have high task interdependence, lots of little tasks that all need to be done to achieve the big overall task, it can lead to creative. So high task interdependence can lead to creative synergy, where team members complement each other to generate outcomes. And this requires that high level of coordination and synchronization, that high level of group synergy. And then received task interdependence is when employees or members of the group receive tasks and they are always influenced by others, which can help reduce their sense of autonomy and control, which is good. We want to reduce the sense of autonomy and control because we want to work all together as a group, not on an individual level. And so considering all those things when it comes to task interdependence is super important. And then the last one is to consider heterogeneity, which is the quality or state of being diverse in character or content. So having diverse characters and diverse personalities when it comes into the group, maybe having someone who typically is the leader, not paired with someone else who is also a strong leader, having those that consistency of people from lots of different backgrounds and diversity to be considered to have that quality level of heterogeneity. And so whenever working within groups, we want to have that high level of diversity, not just like diversity in people's abilities and the way they look and things like that and background. Yes, we want that, but also diversity in personalities, work flow, how people, like if you're a manager, how individuals work on their individual projects and not putting, two people who are very type A personalities together, which that can create friction, and having that balance of overall groups. Some other strategies to form groups are obviously we talked about group size. So keeping groups small, designating time for regular group meetings. So whether that be weekly, biweekly, monthly, quarterly, every other month, etc. Using the different skills of your team members to help delegate your tasks and subtasks, assigning roles to everyone. We talked about that a little bit. Allowing your team members, employees, coworkers to use digital tools that facilitate remote and or asynchronous meetings like Zoom, phone calls. I know everyone in the state uses WebEx, which WebEx is not my favorite, but definitely can be useful for remote team meetings. Using things like Whiteboard on Zoom. There's things like Kahoot, or if you've ever used a Mira board, I can type that in the chat here, but a Mira board is another like kind of whiteboard feature of Zoom, if you're familiar with that, where you can have like sticky notes and type things out and everyone can participate in live time like a Google Doc would. And then designating time in the project schedule for the group to integrate their different parts and responsibilities in order to form that overall group project and outcome. If someone typed in the chat, Trevor, WebEx is the loser of meeting platforms. So of course we, the state, use it, is my opening joke for rapid response meetings. Yes, it's definitely not the most user-friendly, Trevor, that's for sure. But Zoom Zoom has its hiccups too. Every platform does. So next we're going to move into group roles and talking about the different roles that we all take within groups and how knowing about these roles can really help when forming groups, because we can identify these roles in other people, and then also identifying who's going to be taking what roles when we start to work within our groups. And so the first role is task roles. So these are people who help the group accomplish the goal. The second role is relationship roles. These are people who provide social needs of the group. And then the third type of roles is disruptive roles. And these are individuals who put their needs above the group, which results in groupthink, which, remember, we want to avoid groupthink. So there are multiple different task roles. There's actually a lot. So we're just going to go through them just to define them. And as I'm doing that, I want you to think about, have you ever been someone who's an initiator or someone who's a clarifier when working within groups? So do some self-reflection as I'm kind of defining these for all of you. So the first one is initiator. This helps the group by processing ideas right away. So this is someone who, as soon as you sit down, before your butts even hit the seat within your first group meeting in the office setting, or wherever you're at, whether you're out in the field, someone who's an initiator always has a new idea, right? Maybe they haven't really thought it through. They don't necessarily know how to execute it all the way, but they always have a really cool idea. Or wouldn't it be so great if we could do this? Or wouldn't it be so cool if we could do this? Like a lot of big ideas, right? And so this is the initiator. They're initiating those ideas. So maybe you identify as that person, or maybe you know someone who is that person. I definitely identify as someone who is an initiator. The second role is an information seeker or giver. And this is someone who not necessarily has new ideas right away, but they always ask for others to share their opinions. So they make sure that everyone's kind of included in the discussion when proposing the initial ideas. Someone who's the task role of an organizer is the person who always keeps that group on tasks, the person who organizes the meetings, the agendas. Definitely someone who's a leader is definitely going to possess an organizer task role. I definitely am an organizer when I self-identify with my task roles. A clarifier is someone who always asks questions to make sure that everyone understands. So if you are the communicator of the group, you would definitely self-identify as a clarifier because you're not asking questions. Like if you've ever been in a group setting, or maybe you're this person, I am definitely this person because we work with a large team at our center and we have multiple grants and multiple projects, and not everyone is on every grant and not everyone is on every project. So anyways, but I definitely am a clarifier in terms of like when we have a staff meeting, I already know the answer to the question that I'm asking, but I'll ask it anyways because I just want to make sure that everyone is on the same page, like very explicitly. So if you've ever been that person, or maybe you have like a manager or a leader who's that person. So a clarifier is someone who asks questions in order to make sure that everyone understands, but they already typically know the answer to that question. An elaborator is someone who expands on the ideas of others. So this is someone who really works well with initiators. So I'm an initiator and I work very well with people who are elaborators. They're able to execute my, big ideas, right? And kind of maybe scale them down or tweak them in order to really meet the system where it's at. And then an evaluator is the last task role. And this is someone who can basically give constructive criticism, but it's so positive that it's not seen as disruptive. It's seen as task oriented. And this is because they are able to reflect on the ideas of the initiator, the elaborator, and everyone in the group. And they're able to positively yet critically reflect on and offer value to their ideas and like the overall project and their suggestions. So as you were kind of reflecting and thinking about each one of those roles, and I have them up here on the board for you, I want you to tell me, oops, I forgot to stop sharing the last poll. So I apologize if you had to like exit out of that. I know that's frustrating. I want you to tell me, let me launch this. Have you ever taken one of the task roles in a small group dynamic? Check all that apply. Oh, I accidentally made this a single choice. So that was my fault, but just go ahead and pick the one that you typically identify with. So if you typically are an initiator, an organizer, I mean, maybe you identify with other ones too. So if you picked that you're an initiator, but you identify with also a clarifier, put that in the chat. That was my fault. I accidentally made that poll incorrectly, so I apologize. I'll give everyone a couple more seconds to participate. Looks like we have a lot of people who are initiators and organizers. We don't have anyone who's a information seeker. Oh, Luis says that they are also an elaborator and clarifier. Yeah. Trevor, I do all of them daily, I think. Yeah. You're very task oriented then, Trevor. That's awesome. Okay, we'll go ahead and end this and share the results. So pretty much people identified with initiator and organizer, but we have other people in the chat too. So that's great. Give me 1 second. Let me go ahead and edit this. We have another poll coming up. I just want to edit it so we can actually check all that apply on this one. Okay. So next we're going to be talking about relationship roles. Let's see in the chat. Amy says organizer, but also an information seeker. Yeah, that's great, Amy. Trevor, I run from dumpster fire to dumpster fire. I think we all feel like that, Trevor, to a certain extent, especially when working within groups. Okay, so now we're moving on to relationship roles. So it's important to know that you can take on task roles and relationship roles. So you don't have to be one or the other. You can be very task oriented or relationship oriented. and relationship oriented, excuse me. Or you maybe are just one or the other. So maybe when you're working with groups, like you're more relationship oriented. You're more focused on the people you're working with and the relationships that you're building within the group as opposed to the actual task. Like, yeah, you want to get the task done, but you're more interested in like maybe building friendships or working with some people that you haven't really worked with in the past, and getting to know them more on like a deeper level. So the first role that a relationship oriented person within a group can take is called a gatekeeper. And so a gatekeeper is someone that sees that everyone is involved in the open discussion and they encourage participation among all members and they help to kind of control the flow of the conversation. So a gatekeeper is how I like to think of it is like someone who opens the gates, right? So if someone is in your group and they're not really participating, they're kind of quiet, or maybe they're not really paying attention, the gatekeeper is someone who kind of calls them out and says like, "Hey, Amy, what do you think about this?" And really like ensures that everyone in the group is participating, because they want to make sure that everyone is involved in that discussion. And they also help to control the flow of the conversation. So if the conversation starts to steer off track or um, like isn't task oriented anymore, then the gatekeeper can kind of help to control that flow of conversation. They're a person who's really good about allowing for conversations to happen within group meetings and stuff like that are maybe like more personal and not task oriented to help build those relationships. Like me and my staff, when we have staff meetings, sometimes we kind of squirrel and we get off track a little bit and we'll start talking about like, what are we going to do that weekend or whatever. And those conversations are important to have in the workplace because they help us to build relationships with our coworkers and those that we're working with, and helps to build that trust that we talked about, which is one of the benefits of group work. But the gatekeeper also allows for those conversations to happen, but then also gets everyone kind of back to the agenda, back on track, back to working on the project. The harmonizer is the second role, and this is someone who helps to settle conflicts between members by maintaining peace within the group. So if this is kind of where that conflict resolution comes into play, if you've ever been a harmonizer before, you know how difficult it is to be in that situation. But a harmonizer is definitely someone who helps to settle any conflicts. They kind of are the buffer maybe between two people who don't work well together in the past. And I definitely am not a harmonizer. I avoid conflict. So when I'm doing self-reflection for these roles for myself, I definitely am not a harmonizer. I'm also not a tension reliever either. Tension relievers use humor to relieve tension when conflict or deadlines loom. So if someone's really stressed out in your group about a deadline, a tension reliever would basically like crack a joke to relieve that tension, try to make light of the situation. Same thing when there's two people within the group that are having conflict. The tension reliever uses humor to relieve that tension between those two people. So they're not really a harmonizer because they're not really settling the conflict, or helping the conflict come to an agreement or compromise. The tension reliever is simply just trying to like relieve the tension that's in the air by using humor. And then a supporter is someone who encourages positive feelings. They console and counsel other members. So someone who's a supporter is really focused on the other members within the group and kind of what's going on, whether it's work-related things that are stressing them out or personal related things. Someone who's a supporter really wants to be there for those individuals, support them, and not just because of wanting to get the actual task done, but because the supporter is very concerned with that individual person. I typically find myself being a supporter. A supporter is definitely someone who would be the first to say, like, hey, why don't you take some personal time this afternoon? The rest of us can pick up your slack and have the rest of the project done by tomorrow or whatever. Or do you need someone to talk to outside of our group meeting about what's going on? I would love to be that person for you. So those are kind of some examples of things that a supporter would say. And so maybe you identify as multiple of these, right? So now we're going to do another reflection poll. So hopefully you were kind of thinking about which ones you identify with under the relationship roles. And this one I thought I changed it, so I apologize, but it didn't save, probably because we're already on the Zoom, so I apologize, but it only lets you pick one. That's okay. So if have you ever taken one of the relationship roles in a small group dynamic, and if so, which one? Maybe you've taken multiple. So if there's one, if you're like, yeah, I'm definitely a gatekeeper, but I'm also a tension reliever, you can put those in the chat too. Louise says, I often find myself in all of these roles depending on the situation. That means that you're a really good group member to work with, Louise. If you can kind of be a chameleon when it comes to relationship roles and even task roles, Louise, that probably means that you're a leader. So we're going to talk about that next. Trevor says high emotional IQ. Yeah. So, Louise, you probably have a high emotional IQ, which is great. Okay, so we're going to end that poll, share the results. Looks like a lot of you identify as gatekeepers, harmonizers, tension relievers, and supporters. Awesome. So basically, someone like Luis, who says, I often find myself in these roles depending on the situation, right? Or depending on the group and the people he's working with. When you are someone who can identify with multiple task roles and multiple relationship roles, you typically are considered to be a leader. Or even if you're not considered to be a leader, you could be a leader within your organization or within your group. Like if no one else steps up, then you are the one who steps up to be the leader. Or, maybe have just started in your role within your title. And so you haven't been like deemed a leader yet by your manager. However, when that time comes, you're going to be ready for it because you already have, like Trevor said, that high emotional IQ, and you're already able to be kind of a chameleon when it comes to task and relationship roles. And you're really focused on implementing all of those depending on the needs of the group in order to achieve that group synergy. So that's like super awesome. So now we're going to talk about disruptive roles. And we're not going to do a poll, so I won't make you tell me, but I do want you to self-reflect because we've all been a disruptive role at some point in our life. Maybe you haven't been a disruptive role since you were younger. Maybe you've learned your lesson, which that's great. But we can all identify with some of these disruptive roles and we know, or we at least like do some self-reflection, yes, but you can definitely probably identify people within your workplace or people that you've worked with before that are some of these disruptive roles. So the first one is a blocker. This is someone who opposes ideas but offers no solutions. If you are a manager and you find yourself being a blocker, you are the worst kind of manager to work with. So I did like do some self-reflection, identify as that and make some changes maybe. But when working within a group, a blocker is basically someone who opposes all of the initiators' ideas, but they don't offer any solutions. Trevor says, cough, cough, my brother. Yes, probably some people in your family or friends, maybe that you can identify as blockers too. An avoider is basically just someone who refuses to participate. So we don't see this in the workplace as much because obviously we're being compensated to participate within our group work. It's our job. And hopefully most of you take that very seriously. But I see avoiders a lot with like my students or like in volunteer positions. We see avoiders a lot. They just refuse to participate. And maybe they're busy. Maybe they have a really good excuse for why they're not participating. Maybe it's like a personal reason or whatever. But if those things aren't communicated, then they become an avoider. So if someone's not participating and they actually have a legitimate reason, they're not considered to be an avoider. An avoider is basically just someone who ghosts or really just refuses to participate. Or maybe even they're participating, but it's in the least amount of capacity possible. So kind of when we were talking about at the beginning where there's that, what did someone say in the chat? Let me go back to it because it was really good. That I can't think of the word. Oh, when people are not pulling their own weight. Yeah. So that's kind of where the avoider comes into play. And then a credit seeker is someone who tries to take credit for other group members' ideas or the workload of the whole group. So you probably ran into these people before, or maybe you've done this before. But this is someone who kind of takes credit for the outcome of the group and or like another group member's ideas or something, which obviously is very disruptive to the group's ability to achieve that group synergy. Because, and I don't remember if I said this, but the group to be able to achieve group synergy, you have to have high task roles and high levels of relationship roles within your group members' personalities. So if you have someone who is like a really high task role and relationship role, maybe, and they work really well within your group, and then your group produces this great outcome, and your manager just is like over the moon happy about it. But then that person comes in and becomes a credit seeker, then your group's ability to achieve group synergy just plummeted because now that credit seeker is being a disruptive role to the relationships that were built during that group work. No longer is your group able to achieve those high levels of relationship roles because the credit seeker just ruined all the relationships that were built with that person during the time of the group work. The distractor is basically someone who tries to get the group off of track by acting silly or talking off of subject. And so typically we tend to see the tension reliever. If they use humor to relieve tension when conflict or like occurs between people or deadlines loom or there's stress within the group work, then they're a tension reliever. But if they continue to use humor, continue to act silly or get off track or talk off subject, like after the tension is already relieved, then they can slowly become a distractor. And so we have probably run into people like this before. And then a dominator is someone who monopolizes the discussion and prevents others from expressing their ideas and wants to do all the work to make sure it's done right. I know some of you were putting that in the chat like earlier when we were talking about it, that there was poor leadership or lack of direction, that there was people who kind of like ran the show and had territorial behavior and or not wanting to own their certain decisions. So that territorial behavior, that's someone who's a dominator. They basically just like take over and they're not able to really collaboratively work within a group because they just want to do all the work themselves. This is someone who has high levels of groupthink because, again, they're just more concerned with getting the work done than they are with actually having like a good outcome and doing the necessary steps to have that better outcome of group synergy. They're just so focused on just getting it done that they just dominate the whole discussion. They really prevent others from expressing their ideas. They just want to do all the work themselves, maybe, and they just want to get it done just to be like get it over with. So this can be someone who is really disruptive to group synergy because when you have this person, a dominator in your group, your ability to have that like great, the sum is greater than its parts kind of mindset, it really plummets because that person is just taking over. Trevor, I'm laughing at you in the chat. Okay, so next we're going to talk about group norms. And just to like kind of connect those things back with all the different roles, learning how to identify task roles and relationship roles and disruptive roles, not only within yourself, like doing self-reflection, which is super important when working with others, but also being able to identify those things in others can help you know who you work best with, who you would work best with, maybe to be able to like determine future projects and future group work. It can also help you determine who you do not work best with, right? People to avoid working with at all costs because you know that it's not going to be able to achieve group synergy. And especially if you're like at a manager level, knowing these different roles can be really beneficial to you because you're managing people, right? So if you know these different roles about your people in that you're managing, it can really help in terms of actually getting work done and getting it done to the best of your employee's capability. So that's kind of that connection piece that I just wanted to add. So now we're going to move into talking about group norms. And so group norms are expectations of behavior for how each member participates within the group. So there are implicit group norms and then explicit group norms. So implicit group norms are things that are not directly stated, they're indirectly observed and kind of unspoken rules. So an example would be like when we shake someone's hand for meeting them when we meet with them the first time. This was an implicit norm that society has taught you or the workplace has taught you or whatever. I don't remember. I mean, maybe you guys do, and maybe it was explicit norm for you, but I personally do not remember anyone telling me that you should shake someone's hand when you meet them for the first time. It's just something that I learned by observing other people, right? So implicitly, it became a norm that we shake someone's hand for the first time when we meet them. Maybe, like for example, in our office, when we're working within a group, it's an implicit norm that we CC everyone within the group kind of on every email. So everyone just knows what's going on. And then kind of that over communication piece. So unspoken rules are kind of implicit norms and what those are. And they can be negative too. Implicit norms can be negative. And so if we're able to address those, then maybe we can explicitly correct them. Which brings me to explicit norms, which are things that are directly stated. They are formal rules. And an example of this would be group contracts. So I think it's important that when we approach working with others and working within a group, that we create some sort of group contract so we're all on the same page and we all have that high level of commitment to the group work. Within that group contract, I would include things like our overall goal is to achieve group synergy. And then here's our overall goal for the project. Our roles within the group are going to be task and relationship oriented, and who's going to take on the initiator role, who's going to, who self-identifies as a more relationship role, etc. And then here are our actual roles for the project. And then I would include explicit norms on your group contract, and I would have everyone sign it, or at least like have it posted or in everyone's cubes or something like that, whatever works for your group. But having those explicit group norms like, hey, we're going to CC everyone on every single email. We're going to meet twice a week until the end of the month to get this project done. We're going to all have our individual responsibilities done for this project by this date. Like having very explicit things written out on your group contract really just helps eliminate any confusion, any miscommunication, and helps to eliminate those negative implicit norms that people tend to have. Like when you assume that your coworker is doing something and then they're like, no, Trevor, you never told me to do that. Or no, Luis, you never told me to do that. Then that's when it starts to get stressful working with others and frantic behavior starts to occur. And so if we can avoid that by having more explicit group norms, then I think we should try to do that. And so having a group contract is a really good way to do that and implement that within working with teams. Oh, like I said, I forgot I had this slide, excuse me, but like I said, having some things like expectations, assignments for everyone, an outline of the process, signatures, maybe for the beginning and the end of the project, and different work plans are really great for group projects. Or group contracts, excuse me. Some benefits of group contracts are to identify expectations, communicates expectations, and helps employees articulate expectations, facilitates employee reflection on past experiences and communication practices, transferable skills for future work and relationships, and an increased sense of community in the work environment as employees get to know one another. I really liked this quote from Hesterman in 2016, where they said group contracts allow employees to take an active role in setting the tone for group interaction. Group contracts can help motivate ownership of the learning that's taking place. Luis, you asked me, do you have any drafted examples for group contracts? I do, and I'm happy to send that out with the follow-up email of this webinar. I just have one drafted example of a group contract. It's like a template. I have a template that you can use. So hopefully the connection portion that you can see is that our group roles that we take on, like our task roles and relationship roles, those form to create our group norms. So the different roles that we take on within the group, those help to kind of form our implicit and explicit norms when we are explicit about them with the group contracts. And then those things form our group behaviors. And the way our group is behaving is the direct result to whether we can achieve group synergy or group think, which we want to avoid. So again, our task roles, our relationship roles, and our disruptive roles all come into connection in order to achieve our common goal of being able to achieve group synergy and then having that overall high outcome of the project or whatever it is that we're working on together. Next, I want to talk about some 6 keys to collaboration, because I know sometimes there's just a lack of collaboration when it comes to working within groups. So the first one is ownership. Ownership is when members need to be empowered from the start. And so having that group contract can really help with that. The worst kind of collaboration is the type that feels top down, where the group follows rigid instructions and works as a team, but never has true agency and creative control as a group. But when they are empowered and they have ownership, they're able to solve problems that occur within the group. They're able to generate ideas and create systems that lead to success. The second one is dependability. This sounds really simple, I know, but creative collaboration requires members to hit their deadlines and develop endurance within the group and trust. Trust is the greatest collaborative projects that I've ever worked on with someone that I trust more than anyone and who knows me on a really deep level. And we're always going to assume the best in each other, even when there's conflict or something goes wrong. And so having this dependability upon group members is really critical, because out of place trust of group members can be really detrimental. Group members, when you have high levels of trust, are able to be transparent and even vulnerable, which allows for those relationships to really build, and then allows for those different relationship roles to really flourish. Structure is also a key to collaboration. The structure should be loose and flexible, but you need to have some sort of structure when you're collaborating. And this is why I really love design thinking when it comes to working within groups, because it's a flexible framework for getting the most out of the group members and out of the creative process. So that design thinking is basically like having the design of the group, having that overall goal of group synergy, thinking about, okay, we're going to avoid group think. Here are the roles we're going to take out. Or Trevor and me and Luis are working together, and Luis is really good at these 2 task roles, and Trevor's really good at these 2 task roles, and I'm really good at these 2 task roles. And you have that conversation and self-identify as those roles, and then put those on your group contract. And that's that design mentality of thinking about the actual design of the group and who's working within the group before you ever get to the actual project. And I do want to preface this by saying, I realize that we all work for the state, and the state has really tight turnaround times, really tight deadlines. So there's not always time for this high level of group thinking. I shouldn't say group think, but group thinking to be had. However, when you do have those things that you're planning for quarterly or every 6 months or a yearly thing, it's so important to take these necessary steps for that design structure, because it can really help with the collaboration. The next one is a shared vision. And I'm not really referring to vision statements that you like put on a wall or like put on your contract, but more like in terms of a shared desire and a shared goal and picture of what you will produce. So, yeah, you can put on your contract that you're going to have this overall goal of group synergy, but just having that conversation of like, um, everyone having that shared desire and goal and picture of what the outcome of the actual project will be too. Um, and that's really important because it helps group members give the chance to brainstorm and individually before working with the groups kind of in that ideation phase of the design structure. The second to last one is fun. So humor is one of the most overlooked areas of creative collaboration. When you look at some of the most innovative teams in the workforce or business world or just like industry, they joke around a lot, they laugh, they have those high levels of trust, and they have like a sense of relaxation when working with each other, and they can kind of play and actually boost convergent thinking and divergent thinking, which this really comes when you have high levels of trust of the people that you're working with. And the last one, candor, is also something that comes when you have high levels of trust. This is one of the key takeaways that I got from the 6 keys to collaboration. And it's this idea that the group needs to be honest about what's working and what's failing. So then they can correct it through the entire process. Because it's important to know that when you have like a person who develops groupthink or they start to have a disruptive role, that you can fix it and have kind of that candor conversations with them. And as long as they're receptive towards it, maybe they were just having a bad day, or maybe there was something outside of work that was conflicting with their ability to work well with others. When you can have those candor conversations, then it can quickly switch your group's ability from kind of going down that road of groupthink to back on the path of group synergy and being able to achieve that. So that brings me to one of my last slides, which is some action steps. So I want you to kind of just reflect in the chat, what is something that you will do today to improve your team's synergy or to improve maybe your next group project that you work on? Maybe you're working on a group project right now. So maybe what's something that you're going to do to improve that you're already working on? So what's something that you can do today when you leave this webinar? Or maybe you just want to share what will you work towards in the next month that will benefit your group project. And then the last kind of reflection question I have, if you want to share any of these, go ahead. Is there a role that we've talked about today that you have that you would like to change? Or maybe a role that we've talked about today that you would really like to start implementing. So maybe you don't really see yourself as a information seeker, maybe you're more an initiator, but because you're in a managerial role, you can feel like your team members don't speak up as much whenever you, the manager, right off the bat, give all your ideas. So maybe you're going to start to become an information seeker, or you want to be. So go ahead and share those things in the chat. Trevor says setting proper expectations and being clear about them. Yeah, that group contract can really help with that. Try out a group contract for a couple of the projects we have going. Yeah, Luis, I think that will be really great. Amy, being better about delegating and holding people accountable. Yes. Christine says, make sure the right people are in the right role that fits them. Yeah, I think that's really important. I think we can't really expect people to do a high level of group work whenever their personalities don't allow for that role that we've put them in. And I think also like when you have conflicting roles, that's a really big thing. Like if you are putting someone who, like 2 initiators in the same group, they're going to be just like fighting for attention the whole time to get their right ideas across. And then there won't be anyone in the group to help actually execute them. um, no elaborators in the group because you have two initiators. So just like knowing more about what are people's strengths, what are people's weaknesses, what are people's roles that they identify with. Sandra says, I'd like to invite my management team to the next synergy training and work on holding people accountable. Yes. Love that, Sandra. This is recorded too, so you can send this to them if they would be inclined to watch a recording. I know sometimes that's hard to get people to do though. Claudia, consider the 6 keys of collaboration and identify strengths in the team to create connection. I think that's great. Awesome. I love these action steps that you guys are going to implement. Thank you for participating. So the next things that I want to share with you are just some books if you're interested in learning more about like group communication and how to work effectively within groups. Here's some books that I found in my research. 5 Dysfunctions of a Team in Crucial Conversations, Tools for Talking When the Stakes Are High, and then some other ones as well. There's also some articles that I researched that I thought were really great. And they're quick reads too. Like I researched more in depthly, but these are quick reads. So I liked those and wanted to share those with you as well. And this PowerPoint slide will be available to you on our website and in the follow-up email tomorrow. So you can access those links and kind of have the reminders of the books. And you can just Google the books. You can buy them on like Amazon. Maybe like buying, maybe a good idea is to buy one of those books for all of your team to have for Christmas or something as like a Christmas gift. Just an idea. So anyways, that kind of concludes my content that I have for today. What are any questions that you all have, if there are any? If you have any questions, I welcome them. I really appreciate you all participating today and logging on. I know this webinar was rescheduled, so I appreciate your flexibility with that and still attending. And again, this was recorded today, so you can feel free to send it to anyone who wasn't able to attend in your team. Trevor shared another book. Brené Brown has an easily digestible book called The Atlas of the Heart, which can help team leaders learn more about the emotions behind their team members. Yeah, that's actually a really good read. I'm going to save this chat so I can make sure I have that. Trevor. He said it's available at Target. Awesome. Any other questions or comments or things that you guys want to share? You can feel free to raise your hand too, and I can unmute you. Okay. Well, if there's nothing else, we'll go ahead and close out. So I just want to thank everyone for attending today's Workforce Wednesday webinar. Like I said, you'll have a follow-up email tomorrow. I will include the group contract template on the website. So the follow-up email will have a URL where you can click it, and then it will take you to the website where the PowerPoint, the recording will be up there, and then I'll have the group contract template on there as well. Just so like you can refer back to it and you don't always have to like dig through your email. If I attached it or something, it'll always be on the website. And yeah, I think that concludes it. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time today. Have a great rest of your Wednesday.